3 identical boys vanished beneath the sprawling limbs of a dying elm tree. One moment, they were laughing in the front yard. The next, silence swallowed the street. No tire tracks, no broken fence, not even a footprint in the soft dirt. The house stood still after that. Neighbors left. The windows stayed dark for 3 decades. The place kept its silence. No answers, no bodies, just memory sealed in drywall, until last night, when the lights turned on by themselves, and someone heard children's voices in the attic, voices no one had heard since 1982. Before we step deeper into this mystery, hit subscribe or bookmark this story. You won't want to miss what waits inside the house on Broken Elm Street. The early June sun poured golden light over the cracked sidewalks of Broken Elm. Heat shimmered above the pavement, warping the air just enough to make the street feel both forgotten and quietly watching. Number 214 sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, its shuttered windows and flaking paint giving it the worn look of a house long left unspoken to. Ben Ramirez wiped the sweat from his forehead with his shirt and jammed the crowbar deeper into the garage wall's corner. The plywood was warped with age, brittle under pressure, but behind it, behind the drywall, something didn't feel right. Why is there framing where it shouldn't be? He muttered, mostly to himself. His wife, Leah Ramirez, was unpacking. Dusty boxes in the driveway. What? She called back. This whole section of the garage, it's weird. Like someone boxed off part of it deliberately, then didn't finish. She walked over, hands on her hips. Are you saying we're about to find buried treasure or a raccoon nest? Ben gave a cautious grin. Let's hope it's not the raccoons. With a satisfying crack, the crowbar pulled a panel free, revealing a hollow pocket of space. Dust floated in the golden light, slicing through the garage window. Then they saw it, a wooden crate wedged between studs and a concrete slab, sealed inside a space barely 3 feet deep. Time had turned the wood gray. The iron hinges, now a brittle, oxidized red. A child's name was scrawled in faded black marker across the top. Danny Leah's breath caught. What the hell? Ben knelt, brushing aside cobwebs. This doesn't feel right. The crate wasn't locked, just nailed shut, the old iron heads loose with age. With slow fingers, Ben lifted the lid. Inside, dust clung like ash to objects that shouldn't have been there. Not tucked behind a wall, not abandoned, not forgotten. A toy fire truck with no wheels, a nest of yo-yos, a laminated school library. Card, Evan Cooper, written in blocky, childish script. A red and blue spiral notebook, filled with stick figures and letters scrawled backward, and at the bottom, a Polaroid. Leah lifted the photo carefully, as if it might fall apart. Oh my God, 3 boys, identical, smiling in red jackets, arms wrapped around one another, and behind them, unmistakably, this house. The same porch rail, the same siding, the same cracked sidewalk leading up to the front steps. She turned it over. No date, no names. Ben rose slowly, brushing his jeans. Triplets, I think. They exchanged a long, tense look. Something cold crept between them, despite the summer heat. Leah stepped outside, still holding the photo. She pulled out her phone. She typed, "Triplets missing Broken Elm Street." It didn't take long. Missing persons minus 1,989. Daniel, Evan, and Miles Cooper, age 7. Last seen riding their bikes home from school in Rosewood County, Texas. Photos, faces. Ben appeared behind her, reading over her shoulder. They disappeared from this street. Leah nodded slowly. I think. They lived right across the road. They turned together. Across the tree-lined street sat a modest brick house, the lawn overgrown, the porch sagging beneath a creaking awning. Wind stirred dry leaves along the walk, like whispered memories. The house looked still. Ben broke the silence. We need to report this. Of course, Leia said. But her voice had shifted, softened with sorrow. She looked again at the Polaroid. 3 little boys, frozen in a moment, oblivious, alive. By late afternoon, 2 police cruisers arrived, 1 detective in an ill-fitting blazer. They photographed the crate, bagged the objects with gloved hands, asked clipped questions. This case is cold as the Arctic, an officer murmured as he zipped the evidence bag. Been closed since '94. No leads for over 20 years. Detective Kwan was efficient, polite, but clearly uninterested in theories. We'll log the evidence, reopen the file, and follow up if anything new surfaces, she said, handing Leia a card. But don't expect a miracle. These boys have been missing 35 years. Ben nodded, respectful, but Leia lingered. She stared at the wall, the space where the crate had rested. Who put it there? Why these things? Why this house? When the officers left, Ben began resealing the wall. Leia didn't help. She just stood in the driveway, looking across the street. The porch light flicked on. A figure sat quietly in a rocking chair. She hadn't noticed him before. That evening, as twilight melted into orange above the roofs, Leia pulled up the missing persons article again. She read every word, every line. Daniel, Evan, Miles, Cooper, age 7. Last seen at 4:12 p.m., near the corner of Broken Elm and Willow Lane. A neighbor said they were laughing, riding bikes. Another claimed they never made it home. Originally labeled a non-suspicious disappearance, later changed to a suspected abduction. Their mother was quoted in a 1990 paper. She was still in town, never moved. I just want someone to remember their faces, she had said. They didn't vanish. Someone made them disappear. Leia closed her laptop. The photo sat on her nightstand. Evan, front teeth missing. Miles, jeans grass-stained. Danny, holding a bent stick like a sword. They looked alive. Now, they were ghosts in her garage. Did you find any sign of a dog? Chew marks, claw scratches, dog bowls, anything? No, Leia said, frowning. Why? Elaine turned toward the front window, gently pulling the curtain aside as she stared out into the yard. My boys loved his dog, she murmured. A big retriever. They used to pet it on their way home from school, talk to it through the fence. I always warned them about strangers, but a dog like that, it lowers your guard. You think the dog was used to lure them? Leia asked. Elaine didn't answer right away. Then she nodded slowly. I think it started with the dog. Then came kindness. Then trust. That evening Leia called the Rosewood County Records office and requested a copy of Vernon Hale's property plans. She was surprised when the clerk responded, That's funny, you're not the first person to ask for those. Someone came by last year. Do you remember who? Leia asked. The clerk paused. No name, just said he needed blueprints of the garage for a restoration project. Paid cash for the copies. Leia scribbled down the note. Is there any record of Vernon Hale's caregivers before he died? She asked. Probably under his medical files. I'd have to check if that's publicly accessible. Leia hung up, left with more questions than answers. That night, after the house had gone quiet and Ben was asleep, she sat on the living room floor with a flashlight, examining every inch of the remaining garage wall. At the baseboard, behind a dusty shelf, she found something small, a pale gray mark on the wood, nearly erased by time. She leaned in. It wasn't a scuff mark. It was a name scratched in by something sharp, maybe a nail. Evan. Early the next morning, Elaine stood in her kitchen, steeping tea in a chipped mug. The garden lay behind her, its soil freshly turned for the first time in decades. She hadn't planted anything yet, but for the first time in years, she intended to. A soft knock broke the stillness. She opened the door to find Detective Sarah Nolan on the porch, her blazer wrinkled from humidity, eyes cautious but kind. Mrs. Cooper, she said. "I'd like to talk." Elaine opened the door. They sat at the kitchen table. Tea for one, silence for both. "I saw the photos," Nolan said. "The items from the Ramirez garage, the Polaroid, the new name scratched into the wall." Elaine raised her eyebrows. "So, you believe me now?" Nolan exhaled. "I believe something happened in that house. What exactly?" "I don't know yet." Elaine folded her hands. "Vernon Hale, he wasn't just some grieving old man. There's more." "We've reopened the case," Nolan said. "Unofficially. Cold cases don't always get attention. But this justifies a search warrant." "I already searched," Elaine said softly, "for years, in my head, over and over." Nolan looked down at her notes. "You said the boys were last seen riding bikes? Were those ever recovered?" Elaine's eyes hardened. "No, the bikes disappeared with them." Nolan nodded slowly. "Then I want to dig beneath the garage, under the foundation, if needed." Elaine blinked. "Why?" "Because in 2001, Nolan said, a similar case happened 2 towns over. Another child, another old man, never found. That man also died of a stroke. And last year, we searched his garage." Elaine leaned forward. "We found a pair of shoes," Nolan continued, "children's size, buried in concrete under the water heater. The following day, construction permits were fast-tracked. Nolan brought in a forensic team under the cover of a structural inspection. The Ramirezes agreed to the dig. They removed a slab of concrete near the garage's back corner. At first, nothing. Then, buried in plastic and old cloth, they found a red metal lunchbox, rusted, crumpled. Inside, a pair of socks, a faded peppermint sticker, and a folded note. "Please don't tell Mom I took the dog treats. Signed, Evan." Elaine sat on the front steps, holding the lunchbox like it was alive. The sun bled gold through the trees. For the first time in 35 years, Broken Elm Street felt like it might breathe again. Elaine stood beside the open garage, staring at the torn earth. In her gloved hands, she held the lunchbox again. It felt lighter, like memory had added weight. Over the years, it had once been fire truck red, Daniel's favorite. She remembered Evan begging for the same one, just to match. But this lunchbox, she was sure, had belonged to Miles. Quiet Miles. The one who never fought to be seen, but always left notes. She turned it in her hands. It smelled like rust, dust, and old apples. Leia watched nearby. "Do you want to sit?" she asked gently. Elaine shook her head. "If I sit, I might fall apart." That afternoon, Detective Nolan returned. 2 small evidence bags in hand. One held the Paikin sticker, the other, the folded note. Elaine stared at the crayon message through the plastic. "Please don't tell Mom I took the dog treats. Evan," she whispered. "It's his." Nolan gave her a moment, then spoke. "We're bringing in ground-penetrating radar to scan the whole property under the house, the yard, everything." Elaine nodded. "You think they're buried?" "I think someone hid something," Nolan said. "And when people hide things, it's because they don't want them found." The next day, Elaine brought down a small box from her attic, unmarked, tucked between dusty holiday decorations. Inside, dozens of photographs, carefully organized by year. She laid them out on the kitchen table, one by one. Daniel, always, grinning too wide, hairs sticking up. Evan, the tallest, dirt on his knees, quick to argue, quicker to hug. Miles calm, sweet, upside-down comic books in hand. The last photo was taken 2 weeks before they disappeared, all 3 standing in the driveway, helmets on, smiles stretching wide. A gust stirred the edge of the picture. Elaine's eyes narrowed. In the far background, hidden behind trees, was the edge of Vernon Hale's house, and next to it, Brutus, the retriever. Behind him, partially concealed by the porch post, a man, thin. Still, Elaine picked up the photo, heart thudding. She had never noticed it before. Meanwhile, Leah was on the phone with the county clerk. Yes, I'm still looking for next of kin records for Vernon Hale. Any caregivers, hospice workers, part-time aides. The woman on the other end typed. There's one entry. A Ralph Mason, part-time aide. Final 6 months before Hale's death. No formal license. Bit odd. Leah froze. Do you have an address? Just a P.O. box. It's outdated. Leah jotted it down anyway. Anything else unusual? Well, not sure if it matters, but Hale's death certificate had a discrepancy. Declared dead at home by a neighbor, but the coroner noted signs of a fall, likely days earlier. Was it investigated? Multiple causes listed. No autopsy. Leah thanked her, then whispered the name, Ralph Mason. That evening, Leah walked back across the street. Elaine answered, holding the photo with the blurry background. I think this is him, she said without hesitation. Vernon, Brutus, and maybe someone else. Leah leaned in. That's your boys, on the bikes. Elaine nodded. The morning they vanished. Leah hesitated. I found a name, Ralph Mason. He was Vernon's aide before he died. Elaine's eyes darkened. Was he ever investigated? No, he wasn't in the original report. They sat at Elaine's dining table. Leah spread her documents. Elaine spread her photographs. Together, they built something, a shape, a pattern, maybe even a truth. The next morning, the GPR team arrived. Slim instruments, swept over the grass, concrete, and dirt. Ben watched from the porch, arms folded, leg bouncing with tension. Detective Nolan stood at the garage, studying the scans. A technician waved. Ma'am, Nolan stepped forward. What is it? There's a void beneath the back foundation. 5 by 3 feet. Not on any maps. 4 feet deep. Could be a crawl space, or a sealed pit. Nolan's jaw clenched. Mark it, she said. Get the excavator. Elaine waited on the sidewalk, garden gloves shoved in her pockets. Leah joined her, arms folded. The digging took hours. At 4:17 p.m., the excavator shut down. The crew began to dig by hand. Then, a shout. Found something. Everyone rushed forward. A plastic-wrapped bundle, then another, and another. 3 in total. When they opened the bags, gently, respectfully, they didn't find bones. They found bicycles. 3 rusted children's bikes, still intact, still brightly painted, though dulled by age. Each with a name tag. Daniel, Evan, Miles. Elaine covered her mouth. Her knees gave out. Leah caught her before she hit the ground. They were here, Elaine whispered. They were here. Detective Nolan knelt beside the bikes, eyes fixed on the faded name tags. They buried the bikes, she said softly, but not the boys. That night, Elaine sat on her porch, her son's photo in one hand, the red lunchbox in the other. I always said, she whispered, they didn't just disappear. Across the street, the garage light flickered and went dark. She didn't move. The wind stirred her overgrown garden, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound like silence. It sounded like breathing, like a house exhaling, like something long buried, beginning to rise, taken about a year before your boys disappeared. That's Brutus, right? Elaine looked down at the photograph. The dog stared straight ahead, tongue lolling, eyes wide and trusting. He sat obediently beside Hale, who gripped a leash in one hand and a plastic grocery bag in the other. That's him, Elaine confirmed softly. Same spots on the ears. According to veterinary records, Nolan continued, Brutus was put down the same month your boys vanished. The paperwork claims he was aggressive. Elaine's brow furrowed. Aggressive. He never bit anyone, correct? Nolan said. That's what I thought. She lowered her voice. I think the dog saw something, or reacted to someone, and someone wanted him silenced. Elaine's grip on the photo tightened. They didn't silence my boys, though, she whispered. Not completely. That night, Leia sat in the dim light of the living room, scrolling through archived newspapers, again searching for anything she might have missed. A name, a connection, a thread. She paused when she saw a 1990 obituary for Vernon, Hale's wife, June Hale. It seemed ordinary until she noticed a single strange line buried near the end, preceded in death by her son, Matthew, age 3. Leia sat upright. Hale had a son. The article gave no details, no date, no cause, just one line, as though someone had tried to erase it from memory. Leia dug deeper: county records, birth and death registries. Matthew Hale, born 1957, died 1960, cause of death, accidental drowning. That was also the year Vernon stopped teaching. Leia circled the name, Matthew. The next morning, Elaine returned to the Ramirez house. Leia met her at the door, a cup of coffee in one hand, dark circles under her eyes. I found something, she said. They sat again at the dining table, in the same chairs, the same quiet tension between them. This time, Leia passed Elaine a printed copy of the obituary. Elaine read it twice. Why would he keep that a secret? She asked. Why not say he had a son? Maybe he lost more than a child that day, Leia said quietly. Maybe it broke something in him. Elaine traced her finger over the name. Or maybe, she whispered, he wanted another chance. Leia looked up sharply. You think that's why he took them? Elaine's eyes didn't waver. 3 boys, same age his son would have been, all in one place. He didn't just want a child. He wanted a replacement. Leia swallowed. Then what happened to them? Elaine shook her head. I don't know. But I don't think he acted alone. Detective Nolan's investigation was deepening. She'd tracked down hospice records from Hale's final year. Sparse, but just enough to confirm Leia's discovery. Ralph Mason had been one of Hale's caregivers. No license. No permanent address. No known family. The break came when a dormant safety deposit box registered to Mason was flagged by a bank in Latch. It had been accessed only once in 2003. Nolan obtained a warrant. Inside the box, a driver's license under the name Harold Moss. Several expired passports under different names. And one photograph. 3 boys. Sitting on a wooden bench, their backs to the camera. But the tilt of their heads, the curve of their shoulders, it was them. Dated July 18, 1990. 10 months after they vanished. Elaine stared at the photo, her breath shallow. I knew it, she said. Ben stood beside her, arms crossed. He looked over her shoulder at the photo. They were alive. Nolan nodded, at least. For a while, Leia spoke gently. But where were they taken? We traced the photo's watermark, Nolan said. It was printed in Arizona, small-town Leblon, out of business. It's not much, but it's a lead. Elaine straightened. Her voice was solid. Then I'm going. Nolan hesitated. It's not safe. I don't care, Elaine said, cutting her off. If someone knows what happened to my boys, I'm not staying here. I've sat long enough. There was silence. Then Nolan gave a single nod. I'll take you. Ben looked at Leia. What about us? Leia met Elaine's eyes. We go too. That night, Elaine went home alone. She stood in her bedroom, opened the drawer that held her son's last birthday card's construction paper, covered in misspelled love and hand-drawn rockets. She brushed her hand across them softly. Then, from behind the drawer, she pulled out something no one else knew she kept. A small envelope. Inside 3 locks of hair. One from each of her boys. Taped gently in place. Dated March 12, 1989. She had cut them after a chaotic bath night. Miles had cried because soap got in his ear until Daniel farted in the tub and made everyone laugh. Elaine smiled at the memory. Then she packed the envelope. If they found anything in Arizona, she wanted DNA ready. Back at number 214, Leia stepped into the garage once more before bed. She flicked on the light. The patched wall looked the same now, but she could still feel it. The secret that had lived here. The lunchbox, the bikes, the name Evan carved into the wood. She stepped closer. Her fingers brushed the surface and stopped. Something was under the paint. She grabbed a flashlight, angling it just right. In the pale beam, it appeared, a crude drawing in faded crayon. 4 stick figures. 3 small, 1 tall. A dog beside them, and beneath it, in shaky, childlike lettering, "We're not supposed to go. He keeps them separated, now says it makes them less likely to plot." Leia flipped the page, her fingers trembling slightly. "Miles doesn't eat unless I'm there. He cries without sound. I think he knows it's coming. Evan tried to fight back yesterday. He threw a toy at Vernon, said, 'You're not my dad.' Vernon locked him in the dark room. 12 hours. A few entries later, the tone shifted. They're older now. Daniel speaks in riddles. Evan stares at me, like he knows something I don't. They don't call for help anymore. They haven't in weeks. The silence is worse than the screaming." That evening, Detective Nolan met with local authorities. Forensics confirmed the remains beneath the shed matched Miles Cooper based on dental and DNA analysis. The sheriff's department opened a multi-state inquiry for Daniel and Evan, under the assumption they might still be alive or had been moved before Miles's death. Elaine sat in the motel hallway outside the meeting room, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her body shook, but her face was still. They knew he was gone. She whispered when Nolan returned. Daniel and Evan. They lived with that. For how long? "We don't know," Nolan said gently. "But the journals end in 1990. The last entry implies Miles died that year. That means the other 2 were alive for nearly a year after the abduction," Leia finished from the doorway. "And after that?" Nolan hesitated. "No trace. Not in Arizona. Not in Texas. Nothing." Elaine shook her head. "They're out there. I feel it." Later that night, Elaine sat alone with the second journal, flipping through the final pages. One entry had been written with such pressure, the ink had bled through the page. "He took them somewhere. Said he needed to start again. Said the desert was too exposed. He didn't trust me to follow. He took the Cadillac." Her breath caught. She flipped back through the photos, the same red Cadillac, visible in the 1989 photo of the boys in front of Hale's house. The same make and model now, sitting in the barn back in Rosewood County, and the fenced property Elaine had never been allowed to enter. By morning, Nolan had confirmed the vehicle. "Yes," she said. "It's still registered to Vernon Hale's estate. Never impounded, just left in a storage barn next to the main house." "Can we search it?" Elaine asked. "We already did when we reopened the case," Nolan replied. "The garage at least. Not the barn. We didn't have 'cause to break the lock." "You do now," Elaine said, her eyes hard. They returned to Broken Elm Street 2 days later. Elaine stood in her garden, the envelope containing the bracelets clutched in her hand. She hadn't stepped into the backyard of Hale's house since the boys disappeared. Not truly. She and Nolan, joined by local authorities, entered the barn together. Dust motes hung in the air like ghost lanterns. The red Cadillac Eldorado sat in the center, a canvas tarp draped loosely across it, faded, but intact. Nolan approached slowly, flashlight in hand. The trunk had been pried open years ago, but no one had looked beneath the lining. Ben, standing nearby with a crowbar, stepped forward at Nolan's signal. He pulled up the lining, a creak, then silence, then the thump of wood against metal, a hidden compartment. Inside, 3 school ID cards, partially burned, but still legible. Daniel Cooper, Evan Cooper, Miles Cooper, and beneath them, a torn photo, 2 boys, maybe 11 years old, standing on a beach, one with a dog, one holding a book. Elaine gasped. "It's them," she whispered. The photo was scanned and digitally enhanced. A logo on one of the boys' t-shirts traced back to a private farm and youth outreach program established in 1992, rural Texas. New nonprofit name, founder Howard Fielding, retired teacher, former colleague of Vernon Hale, Oak Ridge Elementary. His name had never come up before. Elaine's knees buckled. "I remember him," she said. "He taught science. My boys loved him." Nolan read the report aloud. Howard Fielding resigned suddenly in 1990, claimed early retirement. No pension transfer, no forwarding address. Leia's voice was low. "Do you think he took them?" Nolan's face was grim. "I think Vernon gave them to someone he trusted." Elaine's eyes burned. "Then it's time we find him." The grass swayed gently. "They say I'm not Miles," she whispered, "but I look like them. I feel like I belong to them. Doesn't that make it true?" She reached into her purse, pulled out 3 delicate bracelets, and laid them gently on the bench between them. "These were theirs," she said softly. "I found them in a box hidden beneath a floor, in a room no one even knew existed." Gabriel stared down at the bracelets, small, colorful, innocent. "I wore one like that," he murmured. "It," said Gabe. Elaine nodded. "That's your name now." "But it wasn't always." He sat in silence for a long while. "Can I keep them?" he asked at last. She nodded. "Keep all 3. That evening, Daniel sat with Leia in the dimly lit motel lobby. He had asked for her. Not for his mother, not yet. "I need to understand something," he said. "Were we famous?" Leia hesitated. "You were remembered." "That's not the same." "No," he said, exhaling. "It's not. But our faces were in papers, milk cartons. For years," she said, "and no one ever found us. You were hidden carefully, given new names, new birthdays, new parents, people who buried you inside a new story." Daniel looked up. "So who am I now?" She gave the only answer that felt honest. "Who do you want to be?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, "Daniel." Evan found Elaine in the motel courtyard. She was watering a planter full of dying flowers. "Old habits. I remember your laugh," he said. "It used to shake the kitchen." Elaine turned slowly. "And I remember yours," she said. "It always came after Daniel's, like an echo." He nodded. "I didn't forget you. I never stopped looking." They stood in silence. No more words were needed. She handed him the watering can. He took it. Gabriel agreed to a voluntary DNA test. The results came back no biological relation to the Cooper family. The news fractured him. "I don't know who I am," he whispered to Nolan. "I was Miles. Now, I'm no one." Elaine stepped in, her voice steady. "No, you were loved by Daniel, by Evan. You were raised as a brother. That makes you mine in every way that matters." He cried for the first time. She didn't stop him. The forensic team released their full report on Vernon Hale's and Howard Fielding's crimes. At least 5 sets of unidentified child remains found across 2 locations. A documented network of forged paperwork, relocations possibly stretching across multiple states. Mason's journals confirmed at least 3 other transfers' identities, still unknown. Fielding pled guilty to conspiracy, unlawful detainment of minors, and obstruction of justice. He would likely die in prison. Elaine did not attend the sentencing. "Let him fade," she said. "Let him rot nameless." 1 month later, Daniel, Evan, and Gabriel moved into a rented house near Rosewood. They didn't speak much about the past, not yet, but Elaine visited every Sunday. She brought food, sometimes photos, sometimes just silence. All were accepted. Gabriel began using his birth name again. Nico. Nolan located a long-lost birth certificate in the buried archives of the Texas foster system. He had once been placed with Vernon Hale as a toddler. Then he vanished. Now, he was real again. Elaine stood in her garden once more, digging into the soil with gloved hands. She planted 3 of them. One for Daniel, one for Evan, one for Miles. Nico stood beside her, watering can in hand. "I think I want to be a teacher," he said. Elaine looked up, surprised. He smiled. "I want to help kids feel safe, the way I never did." Elaine nodded. "That would be the best thing you could do." And together, they watered the roots.